Proposed land use changes around Lake Jackson have neighbors there wondering and worrying about the impacts on the environment and the look of their community.
A 4,000-acre lake just outside Tallahassee doesn't simply vanish overnight. But today, where fishermen once launched boats and families watched sunsets over open water, there is only cracked earth, dying vegetation, and a massive dark hole swallowing whatever remains. This is Lake Jackson, and right now, it is disappearing. Not because of pollution, not because of a hurricane, and not because someone drained it. The entire lake is collapsing into a sinkhole at the bottom of its own basin. Over the past several months, nearly 12 billion gallons of water have vanished underground through a place known as Porter's Sink, a cavernous opening in the lake floor that now sits exposed to the sky, like the entrance to another world. People are walking across areas that should be under more than 20 feet of water. Fossil hunters are climbing directly into the sinkhole itself, searching for prehistoric bones buried beneath the mud. Boat ramps end in dirt. Fish are trapped in shrinking pools. And scientists are now asking a terrifying question. What happens if this is no longer rare? Because Lake Jackson has disappeared before. But never like this. To understand what's happening, you first have to understand the land beneath Florida itself. Most people think of Florida as beaches, swamps, and flat terrain. But underneath the surface lies one of the largest limestone systems in the world. Over millions of years, groundwater slowly dissolved huge sections of rock underground, creating caves, tunnels, and hidden rivers stretching for miles beneath the state. This landscape is known as karst terrain. And lakes built on top of karst terrain can behave unpredictably. Lake Jackson is one of them. Unlike normal lakes, it has no major river feeding it and no outlet carrying water away. It sits inside a closed basin where rainfall collects naturally. Beneath the lake floor are two ancient sinkholes, Lime Sink and Porter Sink. Normally, thick layers of sediment plug these drains, allowing the basin to remain full of water. But when those plugs fail, the lake empties. And in late 2025, after months of severe drought across North Florida, that's exactly what happened. Rainfall stopped replenishing the basin. Temperatures remained unusually warm. Evaporation intensified. And beneath the waterline, the sediment sealing Porter's Sink slowly weakened until it finally gave way. Then, the draining began. Witnesses described the lake behaving like a giant bathtub, with the plug suddenly removed. Water spiraled downward into the exposed sinkhole, creating whirlpool-like currents as billions of gallons disappeared into the darkness below. Within days, huge portions of the lake bed emerged. And then, something even stranger happened. Scientists realized the water wasn't gone. It was traveling underground. Years earlier, researchers had poured tracer dye into Porter's Sink to discover where the disappearing water actually ends up. The results shocked them. The dye traveled nearly 19 miles south through underground channels inside the upper Florida aquifer before resurfacing at Wakulla Spring, one of the largest freshwater springs on Earth. That means Lake Jackson isn't disappearing. It's moving. Slowly, invisibly. Beneath forests, highways, neighborhoods, and limestone caverns deep underground. At an average speed of less than 1 kilometer per day, the lake is effectively migrating through Florida's hidden plumbing system toward one of the state's most famous natural springs. And that discovery changes the story entirely. Because the real danger may not be the lake disappearing. The real danger is why it's happening more often. Historically, Lake Jackson drained roughly once every 20 years. Indigenous communities even had a name for it, meaning disappearing waters. Records show major drain events in 1829, 1907, 1932, 1957, and 1982. But after the late 1990s, something changed dramatically. The lake drained again in 1999, then 2001, then 2006. Then 2012, then 2021, and now again in 2025. What once happened every few decades is now happening every few years. Scientists don't yet fully understand why, but many believe the accelerating cycle is connected to intensifying drought conditions, shifting rainfall patterns, and increasing pressure on the Florida aquifer itself. And right now, the timing could not be worse. The National Weather Service has placed parts of the region under extreme drought conditions. Water shortage warnings have been issued across Florida's management districts. Reservoirs and wetlands are shrinking. Even nearby lakes like Cascade Lake are exposing tree trunks that were underwater only a year ago. The state is drying out. And as groundwater demand rises, the aquifer beneath Florida is being stressed from multiple directions at once. This matters because the aquifer does far more than feed springs. It supplies drinking water for nearly 400,000 people in the Tallahassee metro area alone. It supports agriculture, ecosystems, fisheries, and entire communities across the state. And now billions of gallons from Lake Jackson are pouring directly into it. At first glance, that might sound like a good thing. Water entering the aquifer could help replenish groundwater supplies during drought. But there's another side to the story. Florida's aquifer system depends on balance. Too much water moving too quickly through underground channels can transport pollutants, destabilize sediment, and alter the chemistry of sensitive spring ecosystems like Wakulla Spring. Scientists are now closely monitoring how this massive transfer of lake water could affect one of Florida's most fragile freshwater environments. Meanwhile, on the surface, the impacts are becoming impossible to ignore. At former boat ramps, residents stand staring at empty mudflats stretching toward the horizon. Birds now walk where boats once floated. Vegetation is sprouting across exposed lakebed that hasn't seen sunlight in years. Fossils buried beneath the sediment for centuries are suddenly visible again. In one photograph, a bobcat was seen crossing what used to be open water. The transformation feels almost apocalyptic. And yet, experts say the lake could return surprisingly fast. A single tropical storm during hurricane season could refill much of the basin within days. Heavy sustained rainfall could eventually reseal Porter's Sink with sediment, restoring the lake once again. That's happened before. But here's the problem. Even if the water returns, the pattern itself may be changing permanently. If Lake Jackson is now draining every few years instead of every few decades, what does that say about the future of Florida's underground water system? And if drought conditions continue intensifying across the southeast, how many other lakes built on karst terrain could begin behaving the same way? That question extends far beyond Tallahassee, because beneath much of Florida lies the same porous limestone foundation connected through vast underground channels. Thousands of sinkholes already form across the state every year. Roads collapse, homes crack. Entire sections of land occasionally disappear without warning. Lake Jackson may simply be one of the most visible examples of a much larger process accelerating beneath the surface. Right now, Porter's Sink is still open. Water is still draining. And somewhere underground beneath the pine forests between Lake Jackson and Wakulla Spring, billions of gallons continue moving silently through total darkness toward the surface. The lake that existed on Thanksgiving morning of 2025 is no longer where it used to be. It's beneath Florida now, traveling through caves carved over millions of years, feeding an aquifer millions of people depend on, moving toward one of the largest freshwater springs on Earth. And nobody knows exactly when the draining will stop. Maybe heavy summer rains will refill the basin. Maybe hurricane season will temporarily restore the lake. Or maybe this disappearing cycle will continue accelerating, turning one of North Florida's most iconic lakes into something increasingly unstable and unpredictable. For now, Lake Jackson remains mostly gone. The sinkhole remains exposed. The aquifer continues absorbing everything the lake delivers. And deep beneath Florida's surface, an invisible river is carrying an entire lake through the darkness.